You open your eyes on frozen ground. There is no road, no building, no aircraft overhead. Your phone has no signal, no map, and after a few useless taps, no purpose. The sun is already sinking. A cold wind moves across the open land, and somewhere beyond the ridge, an animal makes a sound you cannot identify. You have just woken up 30,000 years ago. So what kills you first? Most people imagine teeth, a cave lion, a pack of wolves, maybe some enormous Ice Age beast charging out of the darkness. But in a realistic survival scenario, the first thing trying to kill you may be far less dramatic. It may simply be the air. To make this thought experiment specific, place yourself in late Ice Age Eurasia during a cold season. You are alone, wearing ordinary modern clothes with no survival kit. Change the region, weather, or season, and the answer changes too. But here, the temperature is falling, daylight is disappearing, and your first deadline is not next week. It is nightfall. Your body produces heat constantly, but the environment keeps stealing it. Wind removes the thin layer of warm air around you. Damp clothing makes the problem worse. As your body cools, shivering begins. Your hands lose precision. Clear thinking becomes harder exactly when you need it most. That is the cruel part. Cold does not merely weaken you. It can damage your ability to solve the problem that is weakening you. You know that you need shelter. You know that you need fire. You may even remember seeing someone start a flame by rubbing sticks together. Unfortunately, remembering a survival video and producing fire under pressure are very different skills. You need suitable fuel, dry tinder, the right wood, a method that works. Then you must protect the flame from wind and keep feeding it without burning your shelter or exhausting your supplies. Your prehistoric neighbors would not be guessing. By 30,000 years ago, people in different parts of Eurasia had accumulated generations of practical knowledge. They made sophisticated stone and bone tools. Archaeologists have found eyed needles from this broad period, evidence that people were doing fine sewing rather than simply throwing one unshaped hide over their shoulders. Their clothing did not come from a factory, but it was technology. A fitted layer reduces gaps where cold air enters. Multiple pieces can cover joints while allowing movement. Prepared hides can insulate the body. Sewing repairs damage before a small tear becomes a large opening. You, meanwhile, may be wearing cotton. Cotton is pleasant in a cafe. It is less impressive when it becomes wet in a freezing wind. So you start building a shelter. At first, it looks easy. Lean branches against a fallen trunk. Add leaves, grass, bark, or hides, except you do not have hides. Then add more insulation, and more. A shelter that looks solid from a distance may still allow wind through every gap. You crawl inside. The ground pulls warmth from your body. Now you discover that a roof is only half a shelter. You also need insulation underneath you. Prehistoric people understood this kind of problem through repeated experience. Archaeological sites preserve hearths, sleeping areas, structures, and organized activity spaces. They were not surviving because nature was kinder to them. They were surviving because they knew what to do. Suppose you make it through the first cold hours. Now thirst becomes impossible to ignore. You search downhill and eventually hear moving water. That feels like victory, but finding water is not the same as finding safe water. Animals drink there. Waste can enter upstream. Microscopic pathogens are invisible, and your modern eyes give you no special power to detect them. Do you drink immediately and accept the risk? Do you try to boil the water without a metal pot? Do you keep walking and risk becoming weaker? Every option costs time and energy. This is what survival games often hide. The problem is not that there are no solutions. The problem is that every solution requires tools, knowledge, calories, and daylight. Speaking of calories, you're now hungry. You notice tracks in the mud and imagine hunting. Perhaps you sharpen a stick. Perhaps dramatic music begins playing inside your head. Then the rabbit disappears before you take 3 steps. Large game hunting was not a casual solo activity. It required knowledge of animal behavior, terrain, weapons, tracking, processing, and often cooperation. Even gathering plants is not the easy alternative. You must know what is edible, which part to eat, when it is available, and what only looks harmless. The landscape may contain food everywhere. To an untrained person, it can still look like an empty supermarket with no labels. Hunger is probably not what kills you on the first evening, but it changes your decisions. You move more slowly. You take greater risks. You may eat something unfamiliar because your confidence is rising faster than your knowledge. Then comes injury. A twisted ankle sounds almost boring compared with a cave lion. 30,000 years ago, boring could be fatal. An ankle injury can stop you from gathering fuel, reaching water, escaping danger, or following a moving group. A cut can become contaminated. A broken tool can slice your hand. Smoke can irritate your eyes. One careless step near a fire can damage the only clothing you have. Modern survival depends on enormous, invisible systems. Clean water arrives through pipes. Food appears after thousands of people grow, process, transport, inspect, and sell it. A small wound can be washed, covered, and treated. Weather forecasts warn you before the storm begins. You did not bring those systems with you. You brought only the knowledge that they exist. And now, finally, the predators arrive. Yes, large carnivores share these landscapes with humans. Predation was a genuine danger. Darkness would make unfamiliar sounds terrifying, and a lone person would be more vulnerable than a prepared group. But predators are not movie villains. They do not spend every night searching for the main character. Cold is always present when conditions are cold. Thirst returns every day. Injury follows one bad movement. Predators are one danger among many, not automatically the first item on the schedule. And this leads to the most important discovery. Your greatest missing survival tool is not a knife. It is other people. Humans 30,000 years ago were not isolated amateurs independently inventing survival each morning. They lived within social worlds. Skills were learned, demonstrated, practiced, corrected, and passed between generations. Food could be shared. Children could be watched. Injured people could be supported. One person could tend the fire while another collected fuel. A group also carried a map that did not exist on paper. They knew where water remained during dry periods, where animals crossed, which plants appeared in which season, which stone fractured into a sharp edge, which valley trapped dangerous weather, which neighboring groups might trade, cooperate, or compete. None of that knowledge is visible when you wake up alone. Imagine that, just before darkness, you see smoke in the distance. You follow it and find a small camp. There are fitted hide garments, carefully maintained tools, stored materials, a shelter built for the local wind, and a fire that someone knows how to keep alive. The people around it are not stronger because they belong to the past. They're stronger because they belong to one another. If they help you, your chances change immediately. You gain warmth, information, protection, and access to skills you could not reproduce in a single afternoon. So what kills you first? In a hot, dry region, dehydration might become the leading threat. In wet cold, exposure could defeat you before hunger becomes serious. In rough terrain, an injury might trap you. A predator attack is possible. Bad water could create problems later. But in our cold season Eurasian scenario, exposure is the strongest immediate candidate. And underneath, it is a deeper cause. Isolation. You began this journey thinking your modern intelligence would make you powerful. But intelligence is not a box of tools. Knowing that fire exists is not the same as making it. Knowing that plants can be eaten is not the same as recognizing them. Knowing that clothing keeps you warm is not the same as turning an animal hide into a fitted garment. The people of 30,000 years ago survived through accumulated knowledge, specialized skill, and cooperation. So if you woke up in their world, the question would not only be what kills you first. It would be, can you find other people before the environment finds your weakness? Because the greatest technology around that ancient fire was never just the flame, the needle, or the spear. It was the group keeping them alive.